from the BBC World Service in association with ABC and All India Radio. This is Stumped.
Hello and welcome to Stumped, your intercontinental hit of news, features and debate from the quirky world of cricket. I'm Alison Mitchell in London, where sports bodies everywhere should be learning the value of consultation with fans and other stakeholders. This is all in the wake of the collapse of the European Super League. I'm talking football, of course, but it's been a story of enormous magnitude here over the last few days and indeed stretching over the week after the league was dropped just like a fait accompli. So I think all sports need to acknowledge that sport is not a business like many others. There's many moving parts and many people who have interests and are stakeholders. So hopefully a few valuable lessons have been learned.
Hi, it's Jim Maxwell for the ABC in Surfers Paradise. I've come down here after the Shield final, which was another triumph for Queensland, their ninth. And they won by an innings over the old foe. They've never beaten New South Wales in a final before, and Marnus Labuschagne's batting was, well, it was phenomenal, and he clearly was the difference between the two teams. So the cricket season at last in Australia has come to an end, and that may be a surprise for some, but not for all Australians, of course, Charu, because they're playing in the IPL, a lot of them.
Hello, this is Charu Sharma for All India Radio in Bangalore, where I am sad to report that, unfortunately, there is increasing mayhem and confusion and chaos regarding the whole COVID matter, because we've got figures now, daily positive cases of over 300,000. So things are not looking very good at all with the COVID situation. And yet, in the middle of all this mayhem, the IPL juggernaut is carrying on. And maybe it's providing some kind of relief for those who can't go out. There's also some lockdowns as well. So many might say, thank God for the IPL.
Well, should we find out a little bit more about the IPL? Jim, Charu, good to see you both. Let's get straight to our special guest this week and get a behind-the-scenes look at the IPL from none other than the men's number one ranked T20 player in the world right now.
Bowls to Malan, who hits this around the leg side. That's going for six, way back. And Malan's gone to 100, punches the air, and he gets a hug from Morgan when he finally lifts his bat to acknowledge the applause all around this ground.
Yes, England star Dawid Malan, currently with Punjab Kings. David, great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us.
No, thanks for having me.
Tell us where you are at the moment. Paint the picture, what your bubble is like.
So we're in Chennai at the moment. We've been here for 2 days now, I think. We've just flown from Mumbai, where we had the first leg of the IPL. You know, we got here on a chartered plane, which was quite interesting in the sense that you had to wear full PPE on a plane and all the protocols that go around it. When you say full, you're talking about the full sort of suit? Full gown and mask and visor and, you know, sort of everything that you need to be wearing to keep you safe, which I can tell you what, when it's 34, 35 degrees, it feels about 45, 50 when you're wearing all that. There and then into the hotel here and you know, it's a biosecure bubble. So, you know, you're only allowed on 3 or 4 floors. You know, all the staff that are in the hotels, they've been quarantined as well to make sure they haven't got the virus. We're getting tested every second day at the moment because of the rising COVID cases. You know, so we feel really safe, really secure inside these bubbles. We've been looked after beautifully. But yeah, I wouldn't say there's much fun about being in a bubble, about sitting in a hotel room and, you know, your only release from your hotel room is when you get to the ground to train or for the game. The world as it is at the moment is a tough place for a lot of people, you know, so as tough as it is sitting in a hotel room, we're still able to do what we do and entertain people that are going through a tough time.
It's your first experience of the Indian Premier League in strange circumstances, albeit, but yeah, your first experience at 33 as well. Is it what you expected? What did you expect?
No, this is not what I expected. I expected full houses and fans outside the hotels and, you know, just cheering all the time and the chaos and the mayhem that comes with the IPL. And COVID has changed that. You know, I've been to the ground a couple of times, and especially at Mumbai, you know, the crowd sounds and music have to be turned off by 10 p.m. So suddenly it's like dead silence, and it's so different to what you actually. Yeah, so it's so different to what you thought the IPL would be. But, you know, that's the situation we're in. At 33 years old, I'd have obviously loved to have been here earlier. But, you know, to still be here is a great experience, to be able to train and learn with some of the best players in the world. It's an experience that you can only hopefully get better from. And hopefully we can start winning as Kings Punjab, because we've not had the best of starts. So we can keep winning. It might sort of lift the mood up a little bit in the camp. We might have a few less meetings because of that. It's
Jim Maxwell here in Surfers Paradise, just wanting to know a little bit more about the atmosphere you're finding in the dressing room, and who are you bonding with? Who are your teammates? And how does that all work for you and for everyone else, as you say, given that there are no crowds on the ground?
It is a strange experience. You want the pressure of the crowd that actually makes the games tighter. So when you get into the back end of the game, if there's crowds, the atmosphere sort of creates pressure on the team batting or the team bowling. So there's more mistakes that happen. Without that, that changes a little bit. We've only won 1 out of 4 games, and we've had probably 2 really bad games where we've underperformed with the bat. So it is disappointing. I think the history of the Punjab Kings is they haven't probably performed as well as a franchise over the last couple of years. We as players want to win, and when you don't win, it obviously is tough when you don't have a release of getting outside of the bubble and clearing your mind.
You were talking before about the bubble fatigue, which has put paid to England batsman Liam Livingstone. What do you think about that fatigue? What's your experience of it so far, and the way it could impact on the rest of the competition?
There's people that are going through a lot worse than what we are. So it's not sitting here sort of talking about how unlucky we are or how tough this is and what have you, because people are suffering in the world. But, when you haven't got a release and it's just cricket constantly, and there's constantly something to do from a mental side, it just sort of feels like it's never ending. The small things start annoying you. Your patience gets sort of shorter and shorter. Your frustration sort of builds and builds. When I start getting like that, that's when I sort of know that from a mental side of view, I'm starting to get a little bit tired. And then it's about trying to get a bit of a break. I'm surprised more people, especially with the extended bubbles that we have now, I can only use myself as an example. And Livy was in the same position. We were in South Africa in November. We did a quarantine there. We went straight to Australia, where you have to do 2 weeks quarantine, which then adds another 2 weeks to the tour. On the way back, I went via Abu Dhabi. So I did 2 or 3 days quarantine there, plus the 10-day forced quarantine back at home. Then you're out of the bubble, or sort of out of quarantine for 2 or 3 weeks. And then you're back into a 7-day quarantine here, which then extends the tour by 7 days. And now we've got another 10-day quarantine on the way back. So suddenly tours that are supposed to last 6 weeks are now lasting 8 to 9 weeks. It becomes really tiring by the end of this IPL. If I last, by the end of this IPL, you're looking at 6 out of 7 months of being in a biosecure bubble or quarantine. But there has to sort of become a balance where either we are allowed to have families out with us, or, you're allowed more time between bubbles, or, you're sort of questioning why you're doing the tests and why you're in bubbles and why you're paying all that money for chartered flights if you're still going to be doing the same. So there has to be sort of something where doing all these strict measures and putting players through that from a mental point of view, where there actually is a release from it when it comes to certain things flying back. Obviously, you don't want to be treated differently to everyone else in the world, but if you're going to be stuck in these bubbles, there has to be sort of some give and take to be allowed to get out of a bubble and maybe potentially miss a certain amount of quarantine days if you are constantly being in these bubbles.
I do have to ask you to move away from bubbles now. Are you still looking for that test match place? And is there a huge mindset differential that you feel needs to change to be able to switch from test match cricket to T20 and vice versa?
No, look, I still love to play all 3 formats for England. Whether I'm good enough to play in other formats is a different story. That's for someone else to make that decision. Since I've been dropped from the tests, I've gone back to county cricket and I performed. I put the numbers on the board that I was told to put on the board. So whether that's good enough or not for future tours is, that's, as I said, that's not my decision. It's out of my control. I've sort of accepted the fact that they're going a different direction in terms of constantly wanting to go for younger players and players that have performed in county cricket as well. Ollie Pope's a hell of a player. When you look at players doing well like that, you sort of have to question whether you are good enough to play guys like that out. Obviously you always back yourself, but sometimes, the people that make the decisions that make different judgments. For me, transferring from one format to the other, I'm very unique in the fact that when I come to my training, I train the basics more than I do everything else. I believe that if I'm in a strong position to play a forward defensive, a back for defensive, a good cover drive, a good pull, I believe 50 over cricket is just an extension of 4-day cricket, and 2020 is once again just an extension of 50 over cricket.
Great to get your insight. Brilliant to hear from you, David. Good luck for the rest of the IPL. Hope you make it through in the bubble and the bubble doesn't burst. But thanks so much for coming on Stumped.
Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
From the BBC World Service, this is Stumped on All India Radio.
Well, that was absolutely fascinating listening to Dawid Malan from deep inside the IPL bubble. Let's pick up on the question of selection. England have abolished the role of selectors for their men's team, and they're giving all responsibility for squad selection to head coach Chris Silverwood. So it's a complete restructuring. The national selector, Ed Smith, leaves the ECB at the end of this month. And James Taylor, who was a selector, now becomes head scout. Along with Taylor, Silverwood will draw on input from, there's the performance director, Mo Bobat, plus crucially, according to the ECB statement, a resource that will provide intelligence from performance analysis, talent ID, medical and sports science. So intriguingly, Jim and Charu, selectors have been used by England for over 120 years. England haven't done too badly in that time. What do you reckon to this shake-up?
I think it's a good idea. I wonder how much of it's predicated on cost saving. That may have been in the background, but I think there's probably been a bit of personality stuff involved in all of this and some confusion about selections and perhaps a clash of ideas between Ed Smith and Chris Silverwood. And at the end of the day, it's like business, I suppose. If the people you select aren't doing the job, then you've got a problem. But they were selecting a lot of people, and they've got COVID overriding it and bubbles and players coming in and out and then players being rotated and refreshed. Yeah, I think there has been a bit of confusion in the way it's been managed. And this is a way of getting a straighter line of communication, of perhaps confidence, more confidence in the selection process by having the coach, as it were, as the main man. I can understand why they've gone this way. And, well, we'll see what they come up with.
Yeah, well, this is slightly complicated. And Jim, as you mentioned, if it's a question of cost, that should be the worst possible reason. We're talking about the highest level of the game in the world. So it does set up several important questions, mostly so about the responsibility and accountability. Who ultimately is accountable? And yes, we hold the captain primarily and once in a while the coach accountable for a squad that's just been thrust on them. So my compromise here is the fact that, yes, I think why the coach? Why even the coach? The captain should be the one selecting the final squad and therefore the final team, because ultimately it is his neck first up on the block. So maybe you can have 5 chief scouts and then present a group of 25, 30, 40 people to the captain and the coach to say, well, this is what we think, should make up the national squad. You guys take the final call. So maybe there is a way to stop calling them selectors and passing on that responsibility there, but at least having enough people going around there to see who's doing what around the country.
Yeah, I just noticed that I think Alex Stewart, the former England captain and batsman, has become a scout now for England talent. John Embury as well is joining that crew. To what extent, Jim, I read out all the lines of what will support Chris Silverwood, which is, the performance analysis, medical and sports science. I suppose to a degree, much of that must be being used already. But how much should he be hanging his hat on what the numbers say versus, the benefit that a national selector would have from, and I suppose this is where the scouts will have this, from literally watching somebody play, the feel you get, the knowledge you get from knowing them personally and their character as well.
The scouts have got a big job, haven't they, in passing on the information and for all this to be somehow analysed and pulled together, because what you also want is some continuity of personnel. And this has been a problem for England in recent times, and that was a deliberate policy to move some players in and out, and others wasn't so bad. Look, I think what's confused all of this process now is we're playing T20, one-day cricket and Test cricket. And you got to get these little areas sorted out so that you don't have too many players to confuse you. I just think they had to go somewhere. And Ashley Giles is the guy in the background. He's calling the shots. And maybe he's accountable also for a lot of what's transpired in terms of the rest and rotation and the other bits and pieces that go into the making of the side. So let's see how it works out. But I think this is a good move in the near term, and it solves a problem for them for the next 12 months. We'll see.
Just to finish with, regarding India and the IPL, and Jim touched on there the fact that Liam Livingstone has flown home already from the IPL and come back to England. But now, in fact, India is on the red list for the UK, meaning that any England players, as things stand, will have to do mandatory hotel quarantine when they get back, which puts quite a different complexion on a trip. You left, you go somewhere with one set of circumstances, things change while you're away, and you have to deal with that coming back. I mean, we don't know yet how that, if it remains in place, how that could affect the international summer with India's men and women due to come to the UK. I mean, Jim, Australia had to pull out all the stops, didn't they, to accommodate the Indian men's team during the Australian summer last year. Can you see the ECB managing to pull off something differently? Because they will not want to do a hotel quarantine on arrival in the UK.
We still live in very confusing times with the whole of this issue, as we so often discuss on Stumped, because we don't know where this damn COVID's going to go. It's not going away. I mean, I can't wait for Elon Musk to build that cricket ground on Mars, and at least we'll be going. It fits my favourite Indian spinners a bit more than the one at Ahmedabad the other day. I don't know, how do we get out of this? Go to the moon? I mean, because of COVID.
Vaccines.
Yeah, well, which is why I say that, thank God for small mercies, Alison. I mean, here are the top cricketers in the world getting to actually continue to do what they do. So a huge section of the population in the world is not getting to do what they really, like doing, and of course get paid for it as well. So, I mean, to me, a little bit of quarantine here, a few extra days in the hotel, I mean, you really don't have to stress much about it because you don't have to manufacture anything. Just have to go with the flow there. I know it's easier said, than done, but I do think it's the trade-off is something that players need to focus on. That, oh gosh, we're getting to do what we really love doing. Yeah, so we're not as free as we were earlier to go around in the evening and have a meal somewhere else. But I think the worst end is to be a part of a team and the whole quarantine, the bubble, and not even to be able to get to the ground and practice. That can get pretty frustrating for a cricketer.
Well, I wonder whether we'll see the ECB clear out the Rose Bowl or Old Trafford for matches prior to India coming out and then effectively hotel quarantine them there so they are allowed to train in a biosecure bubble. We will see. Well, that is it for this week's Stumped here on All India Radio. Don't forget you can stay in touch with us throughout the week on Twitter. We're at BBCWS Sport. Use the hashtag BBC Stumped. My thanks to Charu, Sharma, Jim Maxwell and our special guest Dawid Malan, and of course to you for listening. Do stay safe. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Stumped is a BBC sport production for the BBC World Service in association with the Australian Broadcasting Corporation and All India Radio.